Hey everyone, and welcome to the risk exposure video, which also I've paired up with preparing for a funding challenge because we feel here at Evolution that it's so important to have a risk management strategy in place way before you consider starting a funding challenge, because too many people think it's about the analysis, the outlook, the entry model, and just hitting buy and sell to get you over that 10% mark to get funded, right? But actually, if you don't have proper risk management in place, it can be very difficult to get to that profit target. Or when you actually succeed in becoming funded, you could very quickly lose the account that you've just busted your balls to get, right? So yeah, welcome to the video. We'll be going through each slide, covering as much detail as possible. So first of all, how many pairs to trade? Because of course, the more pairs that you add into your watch list, the more upside potential, right? If you make 3% on each pair and you've got 4 or 5 pairs, then you might say, well, I could pass a funding challenge in 1 week, no problem. But also you've got more potential risk. What if you take one losing trade on 5 pairs? Yeah, it's only one losing trade on one pair, but because there's 5 of them, you've now lost half of your maximum drawdown. You're now minus 5% already. Whereas letting probabilities play out, you're much more likely to be successful taking potentially 5 consecutive losses just on EU, knowing that winners are just around the corner. Risk management is key in sustaining that funded capital as well. Like I mentioned earlier, you've got things that you've got to factor in, like daily loss. Some firms have floating equity drawdown as well. So if you're in a winning trade and it gets to plus 2% and then it pulls back and takes you out for -1, then you're actually potentially used up 3% risk exposure for that day rather than just the one that you intended to, right? And you've got max daily drawdown, which is normally around what 4 or 5%, maybe 6%, depending on the firm. It's typically about 4, and then overall drawdown, like max drawdown, is like between 8 and 12, typically 10%. Now we must understand that losing streaks and drawdown periods are normal. The market does shift in cycles. Of course, if you're trading more counter moves than pro trend, pro momentum moves, your strike rate is going to be lower, but also knowing that you could pick a week where there's 5 winners and you could just be very fortunate, or you could pick a week where we do have naturally a drawdown period. You've got to not blame yourself, can't blame the strategy, can't blame the pairs that you took, or even the trades you took, as long as they were on plan and higher probability setups. That the market does move in cycles and the whole game is based on probabilities. That's why we have an edge that can give us maybe about 4 or 5, sometimes 6 out of 10 winners, depending on what period and what our strike rate is at the time. We're going to cover micro versus macro focus, like focusing too much on individual setups, weeks, even a month, versus taking a step back. My most recent funding pass was in June, early June, and it took me 52 days based on risking 0.5% per trade, trading 2 pairs for that period. Now that we've got no time limit, challenges all over the place is great, and you don't need to have to want to pass a challenge in the first week. I know that you want to get funded super fast. It's a great feeling, of course, and it's a tool to use to then extract money from that and put it into a personal account. But you've got to have that perspective, that larger, that bigger picture perspective, and instill some patience. So we will look at the macro focus. And then how we manage our emotions when dealing with risk. Emotion is just as important as the technical side of things, the theoretical side of things. We're going to have that fine balance. You can have a really good strategy like we have at Evolution, but if you are too emotional, you're just going to inflict some real damage on your own ability to keep trading in the future. So moving forwards, just like I mentioned, if you are trading more pairs, yes, you've got more upside potential, but you've also got more potential risk as well. You've also got to think about, okay, for every single pair that you're adding in, you've got to do thorough testing on that. So unless you're willing to do data collection over a period of 4, 5, 6 months before actually taking a challenge, You know, that's the perspective. You can't just watch the videos over 10 days and then do back testing on one pair and add in 5. You've got to know how each one works. And it is better, like we say frequently, to diversify your pairs into separate accounts because it really reduces your risk exposure. So what do we do if we're trading multiple pairs? Like I said before, if you land on a good week, you can make more gains. You can. You know, if you win EU, you win AU, you win GU, and you're doing the opposite on dollar Swiss, and they all win, you've made 12%, you've passed your phase 1, right? However, if each of them within a period of 2 weeks take 3 consecutive losses, that's your max drawdown gone. That's 12% gone. When really you're only looking at 3 to 4 consecutive losses on each pair, which through your own data collection will suggest that that is normal, and trading 1 to 2 pairs won't actually cause you that much damage. Yes, you will go into drawdown periods, and that's very normal, but as long as you sustain those losses so they're not detrimental to the account and not detrimental to your own emotions, you will get yourself back out of that. There are multiple times where students have been -5, even -9%, and they've gone on and passed that funding. It's because they've kept their head focused and they're focusing on the macro versus the micro, and they're not trading more than 2 pairs on one account, typically. Yeah, so what account type are you using? Obviously, this comes into play as well. If you're risking your own money and you're trading a personal account, there are no rules. Like, you could blow that whole account by losing something like 360 trades in a row, right? But that's very rare. That's not going to happen unless you're just wilding out on the charts and not following a strategy. But yeah, if you're trading 4 or 5 pairs, then you can afford to take 10 losses in a row, because you could finish a 2-week period -10, -12, and then finish the quarter plus 30%. So basically what you're doing is you're seeing this on a micro level, trading 1 to 2 pairs. If you're trading 5 pairs on a personal, you're going to have deeper peaks and troughs. It's going to play out in the long run, but that's not sustainable on a funded account. So you've got to really think about, what kind of account am I using? And also from an emotional standpoint, what is your risk tolerance? Are you happy to see negative $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 in your account, just seeing red, 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 and then holding that for a period of potentially 6 to 8 weeks before you see blue, 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 and you go, that was just the drawdown period? Some people would crumble just seeing $1,000 in negative. It depends what your risk tolerance is and what your relationship with money is and what your experience level is in both trading and trading funding accounts. How is it going to affect you emotionally? And also knowing, and I'll talk about this later, but knowing that funded accounts are just a tool. Like, if you blow an account or fail a challenge, phase 1 or phase 2, it doesn't matter. I know you paid for the challenge and that's hard-earned money, but really it's a great opportunity, and that's what we're going to look at it. Okay, we might have to wait 30 days for another paycheck to pay for another challenge. So be it. Go for a 50K, spend $200. Don't spend $2,000 on a 400K or whatever it is. Only purchase and go for an account which is what you can afford to lose, is what I'm trying to say. So what if you're trading less pairs? What if you're trading 1 pair or 2, which is what we'd recommend on a funded account? You will make lower gains, or you could make lower gains. I'm not saying you will, you could. However, you're also managing your risk exposure. So again, if you take, let's say, average is probably 3 consecutive losses on a pair, right? And you take 3 losses on EU, all you're waiting for is 1 winner to bring you back to break even. So again, those peaks and troughs are very shallow. If you're then adding in GU, then you're potentially going into a -6% drawdown, and you'll need 2 winning trades to get you back to break even, or 1 winning trade and you'll just draw down by 3%, which, depending on your risk tolerance, your exposure levels to the market, your experience levels, it shouldn't really affect you. And those peaks and troughs are just getting slightly larger, but it's more manageable. Yes, you get those freak weeks, and yes, you're adding more risk if you're trading against the trend and trading against momentum with counterplays. That's down to you. That's why we introduced the 4-hour momentum filter. So you take less of those, but this is definitely our recommendation. Your funded accounts and challenges are likely to be at less risk because you're not going to get to that max drawdown of 10 to 12% very often. And even if that happens, it's going to take a lot longer for that to play out. You're not going to lose an account in a week, maybe 2-3 months. But that's why when you pass a challenge, you get your refund. Don't spend that on a monthly repayment on a Mercedes. Put that into another challenge. And while you're trading that live account, you're also doing another challenge because you're diversifying your portfolio, right? And that's also why I wouldn't actually personally recommend a trade copier, because if you're blowing one account or losing one account, you're losing them all. I would diversify and say, right, I'm going to trade GU on this one, dollar Swiss on this one, EU on this one, and that's the way it is. If I lose one, I've still got 2 more, vice versa. And you will find yourself more emotionally stable for all of these reasons. So, yeah, on a funded account, you do have these types of risk that you've got to factor in. And they are going to drive your emotions, and they are also going to be a technical factor to whether you're going to pass the challenge verification or not, or whether you're going to keep hold of that funded account or not. Again, don't put it on a pedestal. Obviously, we want to do as much as we can to keep that and to pass the challenge. Worst case scenario, we'll just take another one. But personal accounts, that's where it has the upper hand because you don't have any rules, like I mentioned earlier. But funding challenges typically have around 4% on equity drawdown. So again, if you're taking 2 trades on 2 pairs and you're up 2% on each of them, it's not hit your TP. You've actually got up to 4%. If that comes back down and takes you out for -1 on both, you've not risked 2%. You've actually risked, what, 5-6%. But they're factoring all of that in. You've got a max daily drawdown rule. So on a funded account, you've got to adhere to typically anywhere between like 4 and 6% max daily drawdown. And I've said this before, whereas they give you that to kind of subconsciously encourage you to actually utilize that max allocation. Do you really want to be taking 4 losing trades in one day? That's not going to do your bottom line any good, and it's not going to do your emotion any good. All it's going to do is instill more revenge trading the next day, trying to catch that up. So for us, we typically say, right, 2 losses in a day and come back tomorrow. With a personal account, I would adhere to the same thing. You don't have the rules, but I'd still instill those same risk management rules for your emotional benefit. Total drawdown is typically between 8, 10, sometimes 12, but mostly 10 on funded accounts. So I'd recommend trading 1 to 2 pairs, and you'd risk either 0.5 trading 2 pairs or 1% if just trading 1 pair on that account, and you are less likely to breach the rules of that funding account, even with these free drawdown periods of maybe 4 or 5% per pair, sorry. So these are the risk management rules that I adhere to, and this is what I'd recommend. So you've got max drawdown on funded accounts, 10% typically. You know that that's there at the back of your mind. If you just let probabilities play out, maybe you take all the losing trades and for whatever reason life gets in the way and you miss a couple of winners, that's going to affect your results. And more than anything, it tends to be that. With a mechanical trade system, it's unlikely that you're taking unnecessary losses because you're not following the plan, because it's so black and white. It's more so that the phone rings, you're in the car, you've got a business meeting, your child needs you, and you just miss a winner for whatever reason, right? That's going to affect your overall results long term, and it's going to reduce your strike rate. So don't worry if you lose that account, but obviously the goal is to not get to minus 10% and lose the account. Your daily drawdown max, I would say cap it at 2%. If you're risking 0.5%, then clearly you can lose 4 trades in a day. That's another benefit by reducing your risk. Okay, it's going to take you longer to pass, but there's no time limit challenges now all over the place, so that's no longer an issue. Max risk per trade, a definite 1%. Don't risk more than 1% on a funded challenge verification or account, because again, you can have more upside potential, but you're putting your account at 100% more risk if you hit a drawdown week. Max exposure on one single trade idea, 1%. What do I mean by that? So like today, for example, it's the 8th of August. If you're in a short on EU and it's not hit your TP yet, you're floating around 2%, First of all, you got to factor in floating equity as well. But even if you don't have that right, that is still 1% max exposure on one trade idea. So EU one pair, the trade idea is short. Let's say it's pro directional bias, pro momentum NFT. It drops down into discount, comes close to TP, but reverses back into premium. You get another setup. Same thing. Would you be taking that? Well, if you did, then you are on the assumption that both of these trades are going to play out. And of course, you're potentially doubling your risk to reward from a 3-to-1 to a 6-to-1, but actually it's more 6-to-2 because you've then got 2% exposure on that one single trade idea on the same pair. And I wouldn't do that. That's another reason why I would recommend to have multiple trading accounts and have one pair on one and another pair on another, rather than having, let's say, EU and GU risking 1% on both shorts, and if neither of them play out, and you're essentially risking 2% on one trade idea. So have a think about that as well. And no more than 2 pairs on one account is my recommendation, because again, you can make more money, you can increase the overall gain on the account in potentially a shorter period of time past that challenge, but those peaks and troughs, they're going to be deeper. Are you really going to want to be -6, -7, -8, -9% in drawdown on a challenge or a live account, and then potential risk of blowing that account? And just think about your emotions in that as well. So here's a bit of micro versus macro for you. So if you look at this, not looking at any single trade or any single trading day as your definition of trading success, your profitability, your chances of becoming funded, your chances of making $10,000, $20,000 a month. If you're too zoomed into the micro, you'll notice that, oh, I've taken 3 losses in a row, the strategy doesn't work, or maybe I should refine something, maybe I should change my pairs. No, you're looking at literally 1 to 3 days and 2 to 3 trades worth, and you're finishing that first week at -3. Who cares? You take one winner, you're back to break even. Then what happens? You take another loss, so you're back down to -1. You think, oh, I've had this funding challenge account for almost 2 weeks and I'm sat at -1. Oh, maybe I need to refine something. Maybe I need to swap my pairs around again. No, you're only looking at 1.5 to 2 weeks. You're only looking at maybe 3, 4, 5 trades. The sample size is not big enough. Take a step back, expand your horizons. By the end of the week, that's more important than any individual trading day and any individual trade idea. Even if you finish your week in a negative, again, take another step back. Focus on the macro. Week by week doesn't matter. Does it really matter if you go to work? If you know you're getting paid every 30 days, does it matter if you underperform in week 1, overperform in week 2, underperform in week 3? Unless you're on performance-based salaries, then obviously that's different. Or you're running your own business. If you're lazy, then the end of the month is going to have an impact. But with trading, don't focus on any individual week either, because you can have break-even or losing weeks and end up the month in profit. Also, not trying to speed up the process to try and pass a funding challenge and hit 10% in a month. Like, who made these rules up? No one. It's just what social media has kind of instilled into us, and the prop firm industry, based on the rules that they've given, is kind of giving this standard of what is acceptable and what makes you a good trader on it. Remember, the statistics are like 4 or 5% of all people that take challenges pass, and then 3 to 4% of those actually reach a payout or keep the account, right? So really don't zoom in too much. Even if you take a winning trade, try not to celebrate. The only thing that you should be celebrating is that you took a on-plan trade. Even if that loses, I will take that trade over and over again, knowing that it fits all the criteria. And that's what you should be focusing on. So dealing with our emotions in terms of especially trading with funded accounts, like I've mentioned a couple of times in this video, do not put prop firm accounts, funding accounts on a pedestal. Yes, it's there as a tool. Yes, it's great value for money. Yes, you can extract really good amounts of money. You can make an annual salary in a month quite easily, but it's also set up for the trader to fail in order for the prop firms to make money by you passing another challenge. They don't make money by giving payouts. They make money by traders paying for challenges, failing them, and paying for it again. That's their business model, right? So if you gain a funding account, what do? You get your payout, you get your refund, you trade that account live, adhering to your risk management rules, and you go and purchase another challenge. And you do that until you've then got 2 challenges, or you lose one, you've still got 1. You go and pay for another one, then you've got 2. Then what do? You go and do a third. You have 3 funding challenges, you lose 1, you back down to 2. Maybe you lose another, you back down to 1. You've still got 1. Then what? You do another challenge, you back up to 2 again. And that's going to be quite fluid until you get to a point where you've extracted enough money from those prop firm challenge accounts into a personal, plus ideally you're working and you're making some kind of monthly income that you can pass maybe a couple of $100 into a personal account, where a year down the line, you've got enough money in there from putting money aside and withdrawals from your funded accounts over a year, 18 months, even 24-month period, where that then you don't need to rely on these funded accounts at all. What's more important to put on a pedestal is your discipline. Staying as disciplined as possible is way more important than how much capital you've got in funded accounts. Like, people put in their Instagram bio, I've got 400 or $1 million in funding. Well, why don't you write in there instead, I'm a very disciplined trader and I stick to my trade rules all the time? That's more impressive, and that's actually going to give you more results at the end of the year or decade. And then the biggest thing is actually keeping a winning yet neutral mindset for longevity in trading. Everything you do and say and think should be for your future self. It's all about creating good habits and eliminating the bad ones, right? Because everything that you think about, everything that you talk about, and everything that you physically do has a knock-on effect on your subconscious and your routines, your rituals, your systems, your processes. So keeping a very winning mindset from a macro point of view, knowing that, okay, I'm going to look at probably minimum per month for sustainability and consistency. I want to look at maybe each quarter to see what my progress is like. How much funding have I got now in the last 3 months? Have I learned a strategy? How much backtesting data have I gathered? Am I doing really well? Have I actually made any money in the last 3 months? Don't think of anything shorter term than that. Thinking about discipline, am I looking through my trade journal and seeing lots of on-plan trades? Am I looking at high probability setups as much as possible? Is trading working for my lifestyle? Do I have a good relationship with my partner, my family? Am I seeing my kids? Am I glued to my chart 6 hours a day? Or am I spending maybe 20, 30 minutes a day looking for setups? The rest of the time, I'm keeping my employer happy at my job. I have no need to hand in my notice because it's paying the bills and it's allowing me to have the ability to trade and eventually make money from that. And also, if you are working from home and you have young children at home like me, a lot of you do, that you can still have that relationship and you can help out around the house and stuff like that, right? It's not about just sitting in front of a chart. There's nothing worse than just sitting there for 5-6 hours looking at candlesticks. It's not enjoyable. Go out and get some fresh air and improve your quality of life, all right? Everything you need to do has to be in alignment with a much more beneficial, sustainable route. So yeah, that's everything on the slide there. There's a lot of key value in this. If you have any questions, then send me a DM or use the questions channel, and just stay as disciplined and neutral as possible. Expand your horizons in terms of your results and your consistency and your success levels. Focus on the macro versus the micro. Make sure you've got a risk management plan written down somewhere. You've got your trade plan, you've got your 4-hour directional bias, your momentum, your trade building, you've got your entry models. What's missing? Your management criteria. And then think about diversifying across different accounts and making sure you're not over risking by trading too many pairs or too much risk exposure on one trade idea. And I'll catch you on the next one.